Lately, you've probably seen all these signs around talking about vote yes for the fair tax. When you're out driving down the street, you see them. When you're out jogging or walking the dog, you see them on the corner. I mean, you can't miss them. It seems like they're everywhere. But what are we really voting on? Are we voting on the actual tax rates? Are we voting on who gets taxed? Or are we voting on something else entirely? And just why is this something that has to be voted on in the first place? I mean, why is this on the November 3rd ballot? And Jared, why is this video coming out on a day that is not a Monday? I'm really confused, buddy. Well, in this episode, we're going to take a look at the fair tax proposal and what Illinoisans are really voting for or against. And let me tell you, it's not just about taxing the wealthy. We'll also look at why this had to be put on a ballot and what you must do before October 6th if you want your voice to be heard on something that just might impact your pocketbook from, say, here until eternity. And I'll also tell you why this video is coming out on a day that is not a Monday. I promise. So without further ado, let's jump into the 6 things voters need to know about the Illinois Fair Tax Amendment. Welcome to another episode of Minding My Money Mondays, a common sense talk about money matters. I'm Jared Rogers, CPA. If you're new to the channel and you never want to miss another money saving tip, then why not subscribe? To do that, simply hit that little cartoon dude in the lower right side of your screen and make sure you hit the little bell icon so that you get notifications every time a new video is posted. Now, before we get too deep into the topic, which is going to touch on several points, I want you to know that the links to everything I discuss in this video can be found in the description below. So once you watch the video, and I encourage you to watch all the way to the end, you should then take some time to check out the sites that we link to. What is the fair tax? Okay, so the Illinois fair tax is a proposed amendment to the Illinois state constitution that would change the state income tax system from a flat tax to a graduated income tax. The proposal, formally titled the Allow for Graduated Income Tax Amendment, will appear on the ballot in the November 2020 election in Illinois as a legislatively referred constitutional amendment. Now, the current Illinois Constitution states that a tax on or measured by income shall be at a non-graduated rate. Basically, we all pay a flat tax and the current rate in Illinois is 4.95%. The Constitution also states that at any one time, there may only be one such tax imposed by the state for individuals and one for corporations. So basically, we all pay a flat income tax rate and there can only be one tax on our income. Make sense? Why is this on the ballot? All right, so now we need to look at why this is even on the ballot. Well, as I mentioned before, Illinois' current individual income tax rate is the same for everyone because the Illinois Constitution dictates that any income tax imposed by the state be at a non-graduated rate. So what has to be done to make it graduated? Well, that's where this whole voting thing comes in. Any amendment to the Illinois Constitution, including the removal that we all be taxed at a flat rate, requires ratification by voters in a general election. Since Governor Pritzker got enough support from the legislature to put it to a vote, it now comes to us, the citizens of Illinois, to make the call. What are we or aren't we voting on? Now, this is probably one of the most important parts of this video. So make sure you pay attention, okay? What people actually are voting on is to allow a change to the Illinois Constitution to happen. You are not voting on the tax rates. You are not voting on how many tax brackets there will be. You are not voting on if taxes will remain the same or go up for your or someone else's particular income level. You are simply voting on allowing the Illinois Constitution to be changed. But this is a big thing. Why? Because if this amendment to the Constitution passes, it will become law, which means that the only people who can then change it in the future would be the lawmakers, not the citizens of Illinois. Seems just like a small thing, right? Well, until you read the amendment, that is. So what does the amendment change? Well, a few things. First, it does away with the flat tax structure, meaning it allows the state to tax people and corporations, businesses just like ours, at a graduated or increasing rates. Next, it gives the legislature the power to determine the rates for each bracket. This is important as the Constitution currently allows them to set the rates, but at the flat rate structure. They can now decide who they will tax at what rate, which could disproportionately impact certain groups. Lastly, it strips out the language that there can only be one tax on income. So in theory, once the new law is in place, the legislature could decide to tax one group at one tax rate, another group with 3 income taxes, and another group with 6 income taxes. They could also decide the rates that go with each tax based on who makes more or less. Is this likely to happen? Who knows? But the law would make it possible, where right now the state can't tax your income but only once and at one rate. What happens if it passes? In 2019, Governor Pritzker signed 2 separate pieces of legislation to change to a graduated income tax. The first piece, the constitutional amendment to repeal the state's flat tax requirement, is what we're voting on right now. If it passes, then the second piece of legislation to set the new rates will then go into effect. So the second piece won't take effect unless voters approve the amendment. If they do, then starting January 1st, 2021, Illinois will be under the new progressive tax structure. This type of tax structure levies increasingly higher tax rates on higher earning individuals or businesses. Essentially, under this system, the more you make, the more you pay. Here we can see the proposed rate structure as outlined in Senate Bill 687. For everyone who has taxable income of $100,000 or less, they will see tax rates fall to either 4.75% or 4.9% from the current 4.95%. Everyone who makes between $100,000 and $250,000 will see their rates stay the same at the current 4.95%. But those who make more than $250,000, well, their rates will increase to 7.75%, 7.85%, or 7.99% of their income, depending on how much they make. Now, one thing to know is that with the exception of those making $1 million or more, your tax rate is actually a blend of all the rates below it. Meaning if you make $350,000, you pay tax on the income tax that applies to all of the brackets leading up to $350,000. But if you make over $1 million, all of your income from $1 all the way up to your last dollar is taxed at 7.99%. Ouch. What are the pros and cons of changing or not changing? Supporters of the fair tax argue that a tax structure which includes lower rates for lower income residents and higher marginal rates for higher income residents would be fairer. They point out that when income taxes are considered alongside other state and local taxes, such as sales tax, lower income residents pay a higher share of their income as tax than higher income residents. Many proponents, including the organizations formed to advocate for the passage of the proposal, have emphasized that 97% of Illinois families would not see an increase in income tax since their new rates passed by the legislature accompanying the ballot referendum only raise taxes on those making over $250,000. But what do the opponents say? Opponents of their proposal, including several business associations, argue that it would hurt businesses in the state. The Illinois Chamber of Commerce argued the new tax system would hurt businesses and push wealthier earners out of the state. Opponents have also argued that the state government cannot be trusted and that the proposal gives lawmakers a blank check. Why? Because the tax hike on those making more than $250,000 is just a promise. It's not in the amendment itself. And Illinois lawmakers don't have the best track record with promises, or at least this is what the proponents say. Like the political promise that lottery money would go to schools, or that Illinois toll roads would only be temporary, or that the 1989 income tax hike would be temporary, or that the 2011 income tax hike would fix the state's debt problem, or that the 2017 tax hike would put an end to 2 decades of unbalanced budgets, or that the 2019 Property Tax Relief Task Force would give homeowners a break. One article which we linked to stated, switching from a constitutionally protected flat tax to a graduated income tax would allow Illinois politicians to tinker with rates, to extract more money from hardworking taxpayers without forcing them, the politicians, to do the hard work of streamlining government, cutting spending, and eliminating the structural deficit that has made this state a deadbeat for more than a decade. It is beyond responsible that the state can't pay for services for its most vulnerable, can't pay its bills on time, and has a credit rating near junk status. And in the end, in my opinion, that statement highlights what the real problem in Illinois is. It's not that we have an unfair tax system. is that the state has failed to manage its obligations and bills correctly. We've all heard that the state's pension obligations are unfunded to the tune of $137 billion. That's right, not $1 billion, but $137 billion. Wrap your head around that number for a second. So if the state is going to close that gap, it's got two choices. Make the citizens give them more in tax revenue or figure out a way to spend less. Looks like at the moment, the state is looking at the revenue side, don't you think? So my question to you is this. What say you? Do you think this is a good idea or not? Feel free to leave a comment below, as we'd be interested to know what everyone's thoughts are. What is needed for the amendment to become law? So how does this pass? Well, if 3/5 or 60% of the people voting on the amendment vote yes, or if a simple majority, 50% plus 1, of all the voters, including those who skipped the question on the ballot, vote yes, then this becomes law. Which brings us to a final thought. Why voting matters? Everyone thinks during a presidential election that the votes for that office are the only thing that counts, or it's the most important matter at hand. As we can see in this video, that's not always the case. This is why when I hear people say, my vote doesn't count, or I live in such and such state, there is no way my candidate will win, I just want to cringe. You see, we live in a country that is not a dictatorship, it's a democracy. That means that we, the people, get a say in what goes on. And let us not forget that some of us, minorities, women, and those under the age of 21, couldn't vote as recently as 1971. So in this here election, even those as young as 18 get to say, do we want to let the Illinois government tax a person more when they make more or not? I know that COVID-19 has many people saying that they might bypass the polls this election, but do I need to remind you that you don't even have to vote in person? You see this? This showed up at my home last week. It's my official ballot for the November 3rd election. As a registered voter, it was fairly easy for me to request my ballot. I just went online, clicked on a few buttons after I entered in my voter information, and presto, this thing showed up. It even came complete with online email tracking so that I knew where my ballot was in the mail system at all times. Pretty sweet, huh? Kudos to the Chicago Board of Elections. Not registered to vote yet? Don't worry, I got you covered. Just make sure you check out the video description for all the important links. Here in Illinois, in-person and mail-in voter registration ends October the 6th. This is part of the reason why I wanted to get this video out before our typical Monday release. I wanted you to have enough time to find your voter registration office so you could register on Monday the 5th if you wanted to, one day ahead of the deadline. Now, if you missed that deadline, you can register online up until October the 18th, and you can also simultaneously register and vote in person at a designated grace period voting location up through the election day, which is November the 3rd. Early voting begins next week in most jurisdictions, so feel free to drop your ballot in the mail or head to the polls to make your voice heard. Now, if you have a question that you would like us to answer in a future episode, you can send it to questions@makemymoneymakesense.com. That's questions@makemymoneymakesense.com. And if you found some value in this video, please give it a thumbs up. Now, like I always say at the end of every episode, it's been fun, it's been real. I'm Jared Rogers, and until we meet again, let's all continue to mind my money, and I will see you all next Monday. Take care.